Hey y'all, Michael here. Welcome to Spooky Season for 2023. Before this episode gets started, I wanted to jump in and remind you we'll be at Arcane in Durham, North Carolina on Thursday, September 28th at 8 p.m. We'll record a live episode, do a Q&A, hand out swag, and hang out with folks. We hope to see you there. Also, Arcane Carolinas Volume 1 is out now, collecting Charlie's research, notes, and reflections from a bunch of stories we've covered over time. There's a link in the show notes to this episode, so check it out. And now, on with the show.
You are listening to Arcane Carolinas, an exploration of the Carolinas' folklore, legends, myths, and modern weird. Each episode, we examine the historical context of our topic and aim to preserve some of the stories that help make this part of the world such a fascinating place.
Hey y'all, Michael here. The following episode is actually a panel from Ret-Con 2023 that Charlie and I stepped in and ran sort of at the last minute. We recorded this early in the morning and with a lot of coffee in our systems, and I think that it made for a really fun conversation. We had a great audience and a lot of great participation. Recording in a conference room can make it a little difficult to pick that up sometimes, but I think you'll get a sense of what it was like to be there. Enjoy!
All right.
Oh, I love your.
It's a jellyfish.
Is it,
an
yes.
anemone.
Is it a
an anemone?
Is it a specific character? No. I love it. So I especially love like original character cosplay because there's creativity front to back in that. I love that.
An anemone.
Yes.
An enemy.
No, she is not an enemy.
That's not what I'm saying. You know what I'm trying to say.
An anemone.
I know.
Right.
I don't know because I've been like
I see an enemy. Yeah.
I see an enemy.
That could be my motto.
Anyway.
Yes.
This isn't the Michael and Charlie do who's on first hour.
No. That would be fun, but
It would be fun. So, full disclosure, we are not the original hosts of this panel. This wasn't even our idea. So the Ghostbusters in Profile of Dan Aykroyd panel was proposed by Alex Matsuo, who has been a guest on our show, Arcane Carolinas. I really wanted to attend it.
Yeah, I really was looking forward to like watching that panel.
She couldn't make it, so they're kicking around like, what are we going to do? And I was like, well, we can do a Dan Aykroyd Ghostbusters moral support group for people that wanted to talk about Ghostbusters and Dan Aykroyd.
Yeah.
So that's basically what we're going to do. So I threw some notes together last night. What we are doing is not what she was going to do. We have no idea what she was going to do. We just figured, if people are going to show up, we'll have a butt in the seat to talk.
Yeah.
So you want to talk about Dan Aykroyd?
Should we introduce ourselves first?
Yeah, I guess we should. I'm Charlie Mushaw, co-host of Arcane Carolinas, talking about Dan Aykroyd.
I am multi-award-winning author Michael G. Williams. Oh, it remains weird to say that in front of people. And I'm the guest of honor for Ret-Con.
And we are at Ret-Con.
Yeah, and we're at Ret-Con 2023. Yes, 2023.
Can you tell that this is the first one we've done this morning?
I've had enough coffee to be awake and to be capable of speaking, but not necessarily enough coffee to speak intelligently. So
That's
we'll
fair.
see.
I'm just hungry.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I got a nice little lunch pack. You don't care about that.
No.
So moving on. Dan Aykroyd. Are there any actors in movies or TV that you consider like TV family? Like you grew up watching that particular actor and liked most of everything they did?
Oh, yeah, totally. So Jim Gardner, Rockford Files. Sybil Shepherd from Moonlighting.
Yep.
Mary Tyler Moore from Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Sure.
Those are like,
among other things.
among other things, but
among a long and storied career.
Right, but like that's the thing that I watched in reruns as a kid and was like, oh, I want to grow up to work in a newsroom, that kind of stuff. So yeah, a lot of TV people the Dukes of Hazzard, like that sounds silly, but I grew up in Appalachia.
Sure.
And that was a landscape that was recognizable to me and
You
a
were
lifestyle.
a good old boy.
I
never meaning no harm.
I wouldn't say never. I was an okay old boy, sometimes meaning a little harm.
I've heard about your fishtailing stories on dirt roads.
Okay, I did do some wild driving, yes.
Running that shine.
No, that was my cousin.
We're actually going to, anyway, that's for a later panel. We're gonna get into some stuff about that in a later panel.
Good. I am very knowledgeable about running moonshine.
Yeah, no, we're going to talk about it at the 8 o'clock panel.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So anyway, for me, Dan Aykroyd is one of those actors. Blues Brothers is my favorite movie of all time. It's got action, it's got music, it's got a little bit of romance, it's got a little bit of horror because that Carrie Fisher character is kind of like a horror element. It's got Frank Oz in it. Anyway, I love the Blues Brothers. It's my number one movie of all time, and probably somewhere in a close second or third is Ghostbusters. And Dan Aykroyd has, not everything he touches is gold, we'll say. But I like overall the majority of his body of work. And Ghostbusters was like it for me when I was a kid. It clicked. It's as far as like ranking fandoms go, it's probably my biggest one. Yeah. What we'll call the dark years, where we weren't getting much other than Extreme Ghostbusters, the cartoon. I still like made myself for Halloween one year as an adult, like a really awesome screen accurate flight suit and all that stuff. So big into Ghostbusters, big into the lore. So I was really happy to just get a chance to talk with other people. And this is meant to be a discussion. This isn't going to be us talking. So if we get something wrong or you want to chime in a story about what, as we flow through the notes, please feel free. So yeah, really excited about it. You want to talk about Dan Aykroyd?
So here's how important Ghostbusters was to me as a child. And I don't think we've ever actually talked about this.
No.
But Ghostbusters came out when I was in 5th grade. I watched it. It was the last movie that my oldest sister ever took me to.
Okay.
Because we were very far apart in age. And so that was the last time that she was in charge of minding me for the day, because she was going off and doing her adult life.
Sure.
It's a real treasured memory. And in 5th grade, our teacher would assign us every week vocabulary words, and then also to write a paragraph with those vocabulary words.
Oh, man.
And my best friend and I, this guy named Patrick, we would instead co-write long short stories using those vocabulary words about being paranormal investigators with a ghost named Slimer as our sidekick, because we both loved Ghostbusters that much.
You have never shared that with me.
I never told you that.
That's amazing.
And that was literally my first experience of being a writer and reading it in public, because our teacher would make us get up in front of the class on Friday and read that every week.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
So you've listened to me for years blather on and never shared that.
But I didn't,
You're just saving it up for this moment. I just want to tuck that away. One day we're going to get stuck in a spot where we got to talk about Ghostbusters, and I'm going to save that gold nugget for then.
I've never wanted to be well, it's my thing too, because it's really important to you.
It is. So the way I was introduced, full disclosure, we are not the same age. I'm a little bit younger.
Yeah.
So I saw it at a wildly inappropriate young age. I also got the instantly in love with it, right?
Yeah.
Whoa, it's scary, but it's also cool and funny, and I don't get 75% of the jokes, but the ones that I do are great.
Yeah.
It was just wonderful. Then, of course, drinking Ecto Cooler. Then they ratcheted up the kids' marketing. After the movie came out, they were like, we can sell these characters to kids, and went full throttle in on the high C Ecto Cooler and the cartoon and the toys and we'll get into all that. But so by the time Ghostbusters 2 came out, I was already full in. The Atari game was terrible. I got the Atari game for Christmas one year. And I loved it. I loved it. But if you ask my parents to this day, if I bring up, do you remember the Ghostbusters Atari game? They're like, that game was terrible. Because
do they have to listen to a lot of it?
They had to do, and it's just a loop of not even the full song, just going,
oh my God.
Yeah. And then it just loops right back to the beginning. And it just goes.
Only paid for 15 seconds of the song.
I think that's all the memory could hold was 15 seconds of the song. And you were left to sort of interpret what was going on the screen a lot. And a lot of Atari games, licensed Atari games in particular, the controls were actually really complex. And a 5-year-old 6-year-old isn't gonna take the time to read the manual and understand that when the Marshmallow Man comes on screen, you have to rush over to the Atari and flick the toggle, because it had like all the different toggle switches. You would have to flick the difficulty one to use your like marshmallow trap or whatever so that you wouldn't die. So every time the Marshmallow Man appeared, I just died, and that was the end of the game. And there was nothing you could do to avoid it if you didn't know that you had to get up and push the button on the system.
It's like the original Wii Fit.
Right. So my poor parents would just like hear this thing on loop and never see me progress. And so I'd just sit there for hours playing this thing, being like, I'm a Ghostbuster, and never get anywhere.
Wow.
Like, oh, I died again, reset. And just be like, what is the point of this game? I'm like, I don't know. But these little blocks are Ghostbusters. Anyway.
That's fabulous.
So all that. So then the second movie, I think we have talked about this. When the second movie came out, we're like just in personal story mode now. I swear we will talk about Dan Aykroyd. When the second movie came out, my brother was a baby. I was a sensitive young man. And so that scene where the slime is about to like get the baby out of the tub or whatever, dude, I lost it in the theater.
Really?
I had to leave.
Wow.
Yeah, so we went to
poor kid Charlie.
Like it was like a big thing. My parents took me out to Hardee's before because they had the Happy Meal.
Yeah.
We got the Ghostbusters noisemaker. We went to Hardee's. I got the Ghostbusters Happy Meal. Went to the movie. Then like they told me it was the premiere.
Right. For you, it was.
And for me, it was.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm on the red carpet, man. I'm at the multiplex at the end of the neighborhood. And just got dinner at Hardee's. Like, just living my best life. Dude, it took me, they wouldn't take me back to see it. Because I was inconsolable. I was like, we have to go home now. They're going to get, I guess I'll name him. Hey, Sam, if this recording ever gets released, we got to get Sam. We got to get Sam. We got to save him. And I distinctly remember, they were just like, Charlie, it's fine. And they were like trying to calm me down. I was like, no, we have to go now, because it was so real for me.
Yeah.
Like ghosts and like the boogeyman from the cartoon.
Yeah.
With the little goat legs and the giant head. That thing was my terror as a child. Like kept me up at night. I thought that thing was really going to come out of my closet and pull me into another dimension. Now I feel like this should just be titled Ghostbusters me up. As a panel. Sorry for the language, but now as I'm like processing
if it's for Patreon people, then we can say whatever we want.
Sure. Do you accept Blue Cross Blue Shield?
Yes.
I feel like we're doing something. Like, what's your copay? I want to make sure I can.
We're in network. It's all good.
Okay, because this feels like therapy at this point. So anyway, and I distinctly remember getting home and seeing that the babysitter was just playing Super Mario Brothers and being like, "I love Super Mario Brothers. All right, let's go back to the movie." My parents being like, everything's good, we can go back. My parents like, it doesn't work that way, kiddo.
Yeah, they don't pause it.
So I didn't actually see Ghostbusters 2 until like a couple of years later. I was like, I'm ready to face this now.
That's funny.
Anyway, I was a sensitive young man.
Oh, bless your heart. I don't think I watched it until I was in college or something. And by then I was like, oh, whatever.
So Dan Aykroyd.
So Dan Aykroyd, do you have like something to dive in with? Or
I have like 5 or 6 pages of notes on him.
All right. Well, then feel free.
Daniel Edward Aykroyd. Born July 1st, 1952 in Canada. Famous actor, comedian, writer, producer, and musician. I'll now just stop reading a Wikipedia article. So obviously we're here because we like Ghostbusters. That's the franchise we're here to talk about. Aykroyd considers himself what he describes as a spiritualist. Mm-hmm.
Does he mean uppercase S spiritualist or lowercase s spiritualist?
Uppercase S.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's old school.
Yeah. So, his family history goes way back.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so
that explains a lot.
He has identified himself as a lapsed Catholic in the past, and most recently, like over the last like decade or so, 2 decades or so, has really leaned into the no, I'm a spiritualist.
Okay.
So that's his belief system. Here's a direct quote from him. I am a spiritualist, a proud wearer of the spiritualist badge. Mediums and psychic research have gone on for many, many years. Loads of people have seen spirits, heard a voice, or felt a cold temperature. I believe that they are between here and there, that they exist between the 4th and 5th dimensions, and that they visit us frequently.
Does everybody know, or are you going to get into a definition of what spiritualism with an uppercase S is? Cool. Okay, good. I just want to make sure.
Cool.
So for the people listening,
I'm like, yeah, you're going to need to give us a nickel version there. Buddy.
Yeah, like a sentence-long description that does not do it justice is that it is in many ways a like religious observation and practice and scientific practice that attempts to sort of merge a belief in the supernatural and spiritual and ghosts and manifestations with a desire to sincerely and openly and honestly investigate those to see if they're documentable. Does that do it justice, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's on the money.
Yeah, there we go. And it kept it to one sentence.
Well, it's interesting because, like, obviously Dan Aykroyd went into show business, right?
Oh, and it was like huge in the 19th century. There was a period of the 19th century when it was like the fastest growing religion in America and was enormous.
Psychical research organizations started with spiritualism, mediumship, especially physical mediumship, and that started the parapsychology movement in the United States.
Yeah, so huge deal.
The Rhines, obviously, who we're going to talk about at our 2:00 talk a little bit, just in the intro. And even Harry Houdini was big into sort of like getting through the bunk and like, believing, what is possible and what is not. Big names.
Yeah.
So his grandfather, or great-grandfather, Aykroyd's great-grandfather, was a dentist, but also a mystic who corresponded regularly with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
No way.
Yep. They would write back and forth on the subject of spiritualism. He was also a member of the Lilydale Society.
What?
Yeah.
I'm sitting here shaking my head because that's like, you're blowing my mind. Yeah.
So for the recording, Lilydale is known as New York State's town of spiritualist mediums. And it only has a full-time population of around 200 residents, but it's estimated that between 22,000 people come and go from there throughout the year for like seminars and to learn stuff and whatever, as part of like their larger society. And Aykroyd's great-great-grandfather was a part of that. Did you ever watch, you know what? I wish I had $1 to bet. You wouldn't take this bet. I'm guessing you didn't watch Sneaky Pete on Amazon Prime?
No.
Okay, there's a whole subplot in that show where like his mom like ran and hid in Lilydale.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's like a whole thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so beyond spiritualism, Aykroyd has been very vocal about his interest in all things fringy, unexplained phenomena.
Yeah.
And this just makes me love him even more.
Yeah.
Because he's super into UFOs.
Yes.
Like big into UFOs and their connection to alternate dimensional theory and stuff like that.
I saw him speak on some CNN show.
Larry King?
Larry King, thank you. He was on Larry King.
Start running down.
Right, there's like only so many. But I saw him on Larry King one time, and he was giving a very impassioned and also obviously sincere case for like why he believes that there are UFOs and the people are being abducted and why he believes that's wrong and talking about like the legal violations of it and stuff. And
I remember that interview because he was like, they're violating this treaty.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't think interdimensional beings or aliens care about our treaties, Dan.
And it was interesting to me in part because he so clearly, really sincerely believed what he was saying.
Yeah.
And because he is somebody who was already famous, he was risking a lot by talking about that stuff. He's making himself very vulnerable by talking about that stuff. And that really impressed me. So go ahead.
He puts it out there. He is actually an official Hollywood consultant for the Mutual UFO Network.
No way.
MUFON. Yeah. Whenever they need, an in for Hollywood or whatever, like for UFO info, he's like on the list of credible sources to ask.
And yet he's like running the risk all the time of being branded as like a weirdo,
So he did catch some guff for a show that he co-created.
Oh, okay.
It ran from 96 to 2000. I've never seen it.
What was it?
It was called Sci-Factor Chronicles of the Paranormal.
Oh, well.
And it claimed to describe cases drawn from the archives of an allegedly real clandestine group called the Office of Scientific Investigation and Research.
Okay.
So it was basically the Weekly World News.
Yeah.
In like short format stories. I mean,
mad respect.
I mean, it's great, but like, he eventually got called out. I was like, most of this is just made up, Dan. Like, what are you doing? Like, there was one where there was fleas the size of a dog that like hatched from an egg in Canada.
He and Richard Belzer are probably really good friends.
Right. So they were having fun.
Yeah.
And that kind of dinged his credibility just a little bit for a couple of minutes.
Sure. If somebody in North Carolina made that claim, I would say let's do an episode about them.
Right. But that show ended in 2000, and he rebounded in 2005 when he released a DVD, like personally produced a DVD called Dan Aykroyd Unplugged on UFOs.
Oh my God.
I would love to get a copy of that.
I would like do really terrible things to get my hands on a copy of that.
And I remember around the same time, 2007, when Crystal Skull Vodka was coming out.
Okay, yeah.
He's a co-owner of that. He was everywhere talking about like legends about crystal skulls and South American spiritualism and like aliens and all these different connections. And I bought a bottle. I was in. I still have the bottle.
Right.
It sits on a shelf. It looks very nice. I've never bought another bottle. Just not super into vodka. Like, I wanted to support it. Like, I watched the interviews where he was like going all in, like you were saying, on like all these different phenomena, and just like, I don't know. It's awesome. It's refreshing.
I was in a fraternity. We can talk about the UFOs all day long, but the vodka can stay on the shelf.
So in 2009, Peter Aykroyd Sr., his dad, worked with him and published a book entitled A History of Ghosts, The True Story of Seances, Mediums, Ghosts, and Ghostbusters. And it explores like their family history with spiritualism and goes back to like his great-great-grandfather. Was it great-great or great? Great. His great-grandfather's intense research into ectoplasm, which back when, the spiritualist movement was going on, there was a lot of fraud actually around. Like, we have ectoplasm. It's like, that's not what that is. Put your liquid soap away. But it talks about like his research and how it like contributed to like debunking some stuff and confirming other cases that couldn't legitimately be explained, which I think is really important, right? Because like, it's super easy, and I'm going to talk about this a lot at 2 o'clock, and I fall into this, becoming too credulous, like wanting, like being so excited about something that you're just like, no, this is it, and losing that critical thinking.
I saw that poster behind Mulder that said, "I want to believe," and said, "That's me."
Yep, pretty much. Again, it's an interesting book. It is still available. His great-grandfather's name was Sam, and he would hold seances at the family farmhouse.
No way.
Yep. And his son, so his grandfather's name was Maurice, and he's the one that then turned it on to Peter, his dad, who then turned it on to Dan. So it's like a real family history there of being into this stuff.
So some farmhouse in, I'm assuming rural, given farm, Canada, under like the biggest possible sky on the coldest winter night with the northern lights doing their thing, and everybody in town, their town being probably 8 people, because it's rural Canada, says, let's head over to the Aykroyds for a seance. I would give anything to be there. That is like going right into my new time machine fantasy Rolodex.
Well, so all of this was documented in like family records, and the great-grandfather kept like immaculate records, and the grandfather kept records, and that farmhouse directly contributed to the creation of Ghostbusters. So Dan was up there going through family documents and stuff. And at this point, he's already a big star, right? Like he's already done SNL. He's been in show business, whatever. And he's just going through family documents and reading up on the ectoplasm research, and specifically the British and American Society of Psychical Research Journals. And he thought, you know what? We should make Ghostbusters. So here's a direct quote. I was sitting one afternoon reading and thinking about all the old great comedy movies, the Bowery Boys, Bob Hope, Abbott Costello, and I'm reading about genuine researchers in psychic and paranormal manners, and I thought, we should do an old-style comedy, but use the real study of this.
That's amazing.
So that's where it came from.
What an amazing idea, though. Okay, so Stephen King and Isaac Asimov and Anne Rice and lots of other writers have basically said that every new idea is 2 old ideas bumping into each other. And that is such a perfect example of that.
And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And then he wrote an absolutely unfilmable treatment. He went.
I love the idea that he like really is impassioned about this and then just writes garbage.
So he apparently wrote this like monster treatment, and it was going to be Eddie Murphy and John Belushi and him.
Oh wow!
That was his original vision that he was going to pitch with this treatment.
Somewhere in the multiverse it exists.
I want to see that version.
Yeah,
because I bet it's really funny. I mean, I love I love what we got, but I would also love to see that version.
Totally.
But after Belushi died, he went to Bill Murray, who he was obviously friends with, and was like, Bill, will you do this? And apparently Bill Murray like isn't big on contracts or commitments going way back.
Yeah.
And he just went, yeah, sure, whatever, Dan. Because he like was just like, sure, buddy. Because I guess Aykroyd was known to be a little over the top and pitch a lot of stuff. And the vision that he used apparently to pitch Murray was, we're going to call it Ghostbusters. It's going to be something that you would call like to get rats removed. Like he wanted it to be exterminators, but for ghosts.
It. Oh my God.
And he knew he wanted Ivan Reitman because of, that guy's history. And so he approached him and was like, this is the cast I want. This is my treatment, everything. And apparently, just to give a little glimpse into how unfilmable this would have been in the early 80s, it was intergalactic Ghostbusters. It was like multiple groups of Ghostbusters across multiple planets traveling through the universe and capturing ghosts it was just crazy.
So he wrote a series treatment for a movie.
Yes, and it was apparently like scary.
Oh.
Like it was just
I do want to see this version.
Intergalactic, fifth dimension, spirit busting space travel. I don't know.
Wait, so he wrote Buckaroo Banzai.
Yeah, basically, yes.
Okay.
Right. So it was just yes. And Ivan Reitman sat him down and met him for lunch and said, we can't do this, man. Like we just like this is one, way too big. Two, would cost way too much. Like no one's going to fund this movie. Like I like your idea. I want to work with you on it, but we got to rewrite it. And so he was like, okay. So then he was like, let's bring Harold in. So they brought Harold in, Harold Ramis.
Yeah.
And they started working on it. And they started reworking it. And eventually they took all their families and sequestered in Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts because Aykroyd had a place there.
Really roughing it.
Yeah. And they apparently worked for 2 weeks. 2 weeks straight to get a pitchable version of the script.
Wow. Good for them.
Yeah.
It's so funny too also that he described it as like the people you'd call like for like the rat catchers.
Right.
Because it makes me think of a different but semi-related SNL sketch that they did a couple of times, which I think it was Glinda Goodwin, and it's Maya Rudolph playing an attorney who specializes in suing supernatural entities.
I don't think I've seen that.
And it's really funny. And if you look it up on YouTube, it's really funny. But like she's doing like a late night TV ad for her legal services, and she's like, you got ghosts, I'll sue them. And at one point a really bad wolf man comes in and like at her, and she yells, "Wolfman, I'll sue you." It's really fun.
Be looking that up on my phone while I eat lunch.
It's really good.
The writing credits are interesting too. Like Aykroyd has said that he described himself as a kitchen sink writer who would just like throw concepts and situations, but Ramis actually wrote the dialogue and the jokes.
Okay.
Which is interesting.
Yeah. And also, like, having watched other things that Harold Ramis wrote, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So they would basically swap drafts. Not unsimilar to the way we've been working on the Arcane Carolinas book due out this fall.
There you go.
All right. Sorry, I had to slip that in.
No, that's, yeah.
That wasn't in my notes, but I was like, all right. Scenes that had to be cut involved an asylum haunted by celebrities, which sounds fun.
Oh, that sounds so
like
cool.
a bunch of like famous people's ghosts.
Yeah.
Guessing it got cut due to like rights and stuff.
Sure.
And then an illegal ghost storage facility in a New Jersey gas station. I have no idea why that got cut, but it's something that Dan Aykroyd remembered enough to be like, yeah, we had to cut this great concept.
That is a great concept.
So they left Martha's Vineyard in July of 83, and then the final draft was done by early August. Murray had been out of the picture during all of this. and so they were like, you have to meet with us because you said you were going to do this. And he apparently like showed up to the meeting and was just like, yeah, that's fine, whatever. And Ramis was, because Ramis had worked with him enough, he said his calming thing to Reitman and Aykroyd was like, I know how to handle Bill. I know how to write Bill. It'll be fine. So apparently, that friendship is what made that work.
Wow.
There's all this connective tissue and like just really cool history that gets funneled into Ghostbusters. And I don't think we would have the awesome movie that we had if all the other stuff that came before hadn't come before.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because it's the relationships on screen work because the people had real relationships.
Yeah.
No. I mean, nobody writes it because he doesn't say the line.
Right.
No, he walks in, he'll have a script, and he'll do whatever the hell he wants.
Right.
That's why people hate working with him. Why he got banned from Charlie's Angels. He's like, well, but for Ghostbusters, Carol Briggs is right. You got to
Give him space. You give him space. You give him space.
I love that.
Aykroyd described the relationship between the characters, Venkman, Stantz, Spengler, as the Scarecrow, the Lion, and the Tin Man.
Oh. You know, I'm going to like immediately rewatch Ghostbusters just to view it through that lens.
Yeah. One is brains, one is heart, and one is mouth.
Yeah.
That's like a direct quote from Aykroyd. Like that was where his head was at while working on these characters.
That's amazing.
Unfortunately, by the time filming came around, Eddie Murphy had signed on to Beverly Hills Cop.
So I'm sure he really regretted that.
Right. He's actually said, he's like, man, I wish I could have done both.
Really? I mean, that doesn't surprise me.
He has gone
you
back
know?
and said, he was like, where I was at in my career, I had to take Beverly Hills Cop.
Oh, sure. I mean, he made his paycheck very well and made an iconic movie.
Right. So the role of Winston was originally written much bigger.
Oh.
And it got reduced, and certain elements got rolled over to Venkman. And then we, of course, got now fan favorite and beloved Ernie Hudson, Winston, right? He's awesome. And we're starting to see in the newer movies how they're going to flesh out that character more and like go back to original elements and integrate them. But we'll get to that. Sorry, I really like Ghostbusters. But that's how it all started in a nutshell, right?
It's good because we're doing a panel about it.
Yeah, we weren't, for the people that came in a little after, we're not the people that were supposed to be doing this panel. By the way, the person that was going to do the panel couldn't make it. So being a big Ghostbusters fans, we were like, let's do a Ghostbusters support group where we just talk about Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
I don't know what was originally planned, but we can talk about the movies. Yeah. So of course, then, the movie goes on to be a big success, the merchandise, kids show, the food, the snacks, everything we talked about. Then the sequel, which was mired in development hell and had a lot of problems and like ever enthusiastic Dan Aykroyd created what he has self-described as something too far out and too inaccessible on the original draft. Are you noticing a pattern begin to emerge?
The guy who wrote the 400-page treatment about intergalactic Ghostbusters from multiple planets thinks that was weird.
You're going to love what he had in there.
Okay.
He had the Dana Barrett gets kidnapped, taken to Scotland where she discovers a fairy ring and gets sucked into this underground civilization.
Sold.
Yeah. See, I knew you would like that.
Yeah.
So the Ghostbusters would have had to travel through an underground pneumatic tube that was over 2,000 miles long, and it would have been a road trip movie. It was going to be their 3 days traversing their pneumatic tube to rescue Dana from the underground civilization that she got sucked into through a fairy circle.
This is so magnificently weird, and it would have made zero money.
You have to steal that.
Right? I love, and you can tell because it's what I write, mercilessly weird books that do not make money. And so I just feel like that's so deliciously strange. I love it.
But that's where the underground stuff came from.
Yeah.
When they rewrote it, he was like, we got to have something underground. I want something underground. There's got to be tunnels and tubes. So that's where the subway stuff came from.
Yeah.
And they decided that it was actually kind of heavy where the slime and the emotional stuff, like how it absorbs emotion and Ramis and Aykroyd wanted to be a metaphor for urban decay.
Wow.
And there's a quote that's actually really, really sad how relevant it is now when talking about how they, developed it. Dan Aykroyd said, cities everywhere are dangerous. Life has become cheap. You can go to see a movie and get shot in the street, which is sadly still very true.
Well, and that's not outside the realm of what they comment on in the first one, even because the fire station is an old abandoned fire station.
Right.
Does anything get more emblematic of that notion than the fire department couldn't stick around and had to sell and move?
Yeah.
The fact that they're just in the worst possible neighborhood.
So for the comedic element, where they were driving at with the slime, so that was the commentary they wanted to make with like all the negative crap of humanity was like just bubbling right under the surface. The comedic element is they thought it was funny if everyone in New York had to be nice for 48 hours. They thought that concept was so funny that would be the punch.
That is really funny.
Now, of course, that was lost on me as a young person.
Yeah.
I didn't see that, but reading like where their heads were at as they wrote it is certainly very interesting. So anyway, it comes out. It makes a ton of money. Murray says he's done. He doesn't want to do anymore. Dan Aykroyd writes an insanely bloated treatment for a third one that floats around the internet for a while. I found it on an IRC channel in 1996. It's basically like they go through some kind of portal and pop out in like a hellscape New York, like alternate reality. The movie was a non-starter. Obviously never happened.
Yeah.
Elements of it were borrowed for the mid-2000s video game.
Okay.
Where there's like a spirit realm and stuff like that. And the entire original cast came back to voice the characters for that. I have bought that game 3 times on accident. I bought it when it first came out, lost it, bought a second copy, sold it. Then they remastered it and I bought it again. I have to stop buying that game.
Have you played it?
No, that's the thing. Okay, so I haven't beat it. I've played it, but I haven't beat it.
Is it fun?
It's okay.
Oh,
It's neat. The story's good.
oh,
And
yeah.
the voice acting's good.
That's good.
The game itself, I find the what's it called?
Controller?
Yes. The thumbsticks don't really work for me.
Oh, yeah,
for the
yeah.
Proton Pack. It might just be a sign I'm getting too old. But the new game is good. There's a new game that came out last year called Spirits Unleashed.
Oh.
It's an online asymmetrical. One person's the ghost, the rest of the team, the rest of the people are the Ghostbusters team, and you have to so one person tries to escape, one person tries to capture him. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Yeah, there's a story mode baked in, like a very shallow story. It's from the same people who did the Friday the 13th game that you've heard me go on about.
Yeah.
It's the exact same model, except instead of one person being Jason, one person's, Slimer or one of the ghosts inspired by the toys or something
Yeah.
like that. So anyway, I'm jumping all over the place in my notes right now.
That's okay.
Yeah.
It's funny about the bloated treatment being around on the internet. Tangentially, it makes me think of William Gibson's script for Alien 3, which is very good and floated around on the internet for a very long time and is essentially about how capitalism is the real monster. But it's stuff like that where like cultural artifacts that almost manifested are like kept alive and revived in some weird way, and our imagination gets to continue to enjoy that even if we didn't get the actual end product. That fascinates me.
There's so much of that with Ghostbusters too, because it's never really stopped. It's slowed down in the 90s, but there's always been something, either a game or a cartoon. The High Sea Drink long outlasted the animated series, which was very strange. Like I remember being a little bit older and being like, why are they still making this? Like, I'm not complaining, it's good, gimme, but like, why is this still a thing? Obviously, after the mid-2000s game, we got the reboot. We got some comic books. We got the sequel that came out recently. We've got a Netflix series and a Netflix movie coming out of a new cartoon. Supposedly, it's on the internet. It must be true.
It's Netflix, so they approved the pilot and canceled it in the same meeting. But
yeah, so they were going to do the whole like Netflix animation model of release an animated movie and then after that have a series. There's been games that have come out that have nothing to do with any of these things. They're not tied to a TV show or a movie or a comic. They're just like your random Ghostbusters, like building on the franchise. There's a 2016 game that's not related to the reboot. It's kind of like Gauntlet. You remember Gauntlet? Yeah. So you pick your different Ghostbuster and you run through a maze. It does not have the depth of like a Diablo or anything. That's why I say Gauntlet, because you basically just start at one end of the dungeon and go to the other end of the dungeon.
Yeah.
Except instead of being a dungeon, it's a New York block.
right.
Right. Sure.
So how do you think that the Ghostbusters movie has influenced the current ghost hunting phenomenon?
So the question was, in case the mics didn't pick it up, how has the Ghostbusters movie influenced ghost hunting? I would say huge. You've got people walking around with EMF detectors that don't know what electromagnetic fields are, going, "Oh, I got a ghost. I'm like, no, it's your microwave. I'm not saying that there can't be disruptions, but you have to understand the technology to use it. So I think it's impacted it in a big way for good and bad, right? It's brought that whole like, hey, let's look at how we can detect anomalies we can't see. Like that's good. But then you've got people that don't know what they're doing with myself in that bucket. That's why I don't call myself a paranormal investigator. Like, I'm just like, I don't know, man. I'm not a good enough scientist to do any of that.
I'm nothing but vibes. But like, I was going to ask a sort of similar pre-question, which was like whether you think that Dan Aykroyd was like trying to make happen what I'm about to describe. I think that the movie took that notion of investigating it seriously and scientifically, and by couching it in comedy, made it much more palatable to our modern sensibilities. And in that way, sort of evangelized spiritualism, but also evangelized a technological look, an aesthetic to spiritualism in a way that it makes me wonder, like, was he doing that intentionally? Was his goal to like expand the, not even necessarily belief in this, but the degree to which this was an acceptable thing for him to believe in, or for anyone who wanted to believe in? Was
he just sort of think he was trying to
create some space? I don't even know if he was trying to recruit so much as he was trying to make
interest.
As just like make it okay for him to be in it. I
don't think he cares what anybody thinks.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah. If he was willing to go on Larry King in like 1997 and say those things, then yeah. But it definitely like gave it an aesthetic, and people have clearly adopted that aesthetic because that aesthetic is scientific. It's important for me to say it's a scientific aesthetic. But I think that like for a lot of people, it becomes so much more palatable to the other people in their lives, their interest in this, if they're able to turn it into something electronic or a gizmo or science or however they want to describe it. Whatever part of that it is that makes somebody say, okay, well, as long as you're not doing some weird religious thing, then...
Yeah. Put a wrapper around it that's, people
totally.
like. So has Dan Aykroyd ever seen a ghost?
I hope.
No.
Really?
Not really. Nope. He's got a new TV show about like haunted hotels, where he goes around to supposedly haunted hotels and talks about the hotel.
And gets to stay in them for free?
Yeah, basically. And he is, so in an interview for that recently, he was asked, have you ever seen a ghost? And he was like, I've seen jewelry dancing around on a desk and felt human weight next to me on a mattress before.
I mean, okay, I'm no Ghostbuster, but that's pretty compelling stuff.
Right. But I love that he's not like, I've seen a class 5 floating, whatever the line is from the movie. Like, he doesn't go to that level, right? He's very honest about it. He's like, I've seen some weird stuff.
Yeah.
You're going to love this. You want to talk about Dan Aykroyd attempting to influence people through spiritualism?
Sure.
So in the late 80s, there is a long forgotten and terrible biographical movie about John Belushi.
Okay.
That the family had nothing to do with, and Aykroyd was really mad about it. And like everyone that was actually knew John Belushi didn't want it to come out. And on an MTV interview, his quote about it when they asked him what he thought was, "I have witches working now to jinx the thing."
Yes.
So that's all she wrote. I think we're at time. Thank you for hanging out.
Yeah. Thanks for coming to talk about Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
This was super fun. So we should talk about where we'll be next.
We're going to be talking about empirical evidence in the paranormal and strange at 2:00.
Yeah.
And then from 8 to 10, we are going to take people on a wild ride through Appalachia and talk about some monsters.
Excellent.
Oh, and then Tally Johnson.
will
be joining us to talk about ghosts for the second half of that.
Yeah. Yeah, from 8 to 9, we'll do a regular episode of Arcane Carolinas, for which I have no idea what we're discussing. I literally just learned as much about it as I now know, and which I love.
It's monsters and shine.
Hey, can't go wrong with either of those. And the second half is Tally Johnson. Thanks for coming, y'all.
Thanks, folks. You've been listening to Arcane Carolinas. Thanks for joining us. If you liked it, give us a rating, leave a comment. If you didn't like it, send us an email and tell us why. If you're not wrong, we'll try to fix it.
And if you're interested in award-winning speculative fiction, including science fiction, urban fantasy, and horror, find me, Michael G. Williams, at michaelgwilliamsbooks.com, and check out Falstaff Books at falstaffbooks.com. If you'd like to pick up some Arcane Carolinas merch, look at behind-the-scenes info, pictures, videos, stuff like that, all the things that get
cut, check out arcanecarolinas.com, where you can get access to our Patreon, our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram, all that in one place, including the merch store. Buy a shirt.
Clothe your body.
Drape your body in our wares.
Be our living billboards.
Try again.
Check it out.
This is some great outtakes.
Haha, look at that.
All right.
Now we have our stinger.
All right. So you want to do this?
Yeah, why not?
Sure.